We're the Young Indie Chroniclers podcast, and we're producing a new feature-length documentary, George Lucas, The Lost Golden Age.
George Lucas was going to do this Lawrence of Arabia scale epic on a 16-millimeter budget.
You got a chance to have the same adventure making the show as what Indy was doing.
His stuff is really quite political.
You didn't think I was going to run, did you?
I learned that when George says he wants to ultimately change or fix something, that he was going to do it.
We built a Kickstarter campaign to support the film. Late pledges are available now at Kickstarter.com.
Hello there. Welcome to Force Ghost Conversations. This podcast is your home for cozy deep dives into all things Star Wars and Lucasfilm adjacent properties. This is your host, Anthony King, and each week I will be joined by fans, creators, and believers in the principles from the galaxy far, far away to discuss the thematical elements from our favorite Lucasfilm properties. And without further ado, it is time to gather around the campfire for some Force Ghost Conversations. Hello there, everybody. Welcome back to Force Ghost Conversations, your home for cozy deep dives into all things Star Wars and Lucasfilm adjacent properties. And we have a fun episode here for you all this week as we're continuing our conversations of Star Wars books. You know, as I'm going through some of the catalog that I have and haven't been able to get through in my time, unfortunately, because of grad school and just moving and other things, and finally getting back into reading. And with that allows me the chance to review some of these books here that I've had on my shelf for a while. So today we're talking full spoilers too, I'll note that. So about Claudia Gray's incredible 2016 novel, Bloodline. So it's a great book. Hope you get a chance to get it on, maybe you reread it again, or if you haven't read it for the first time yourself, then a great chance to go do that. And we have Dr. Greg Cass from the Long Take Review and Rebel Base Card Second Breakfast back on the show to talk all things Bloodline. It's a great book, great political intrigue, great Leia content in there as well. So look forward to sharing that with you all on the other side of this segment here, which is Cloud City Gossip, where we talk about the news that's taken place in the Star Wars and Lucasfilm adjacent galaxy over the past week here. And there's just a little bit of stuff here. So the Ninth Jedi, the new Star Wars series, the Visions expanded series, is now out on Disney Plus. So go check it out. We'll eventually get to it here on the podcast, maybe at the end of this month, if all things go according to plan here, because we will be at D23 next week. So again, if you haven't been following along, that is the Disney Ultimate Fan event, and we will be there, boots on the ground, all throughout the week, next week, to report on anything that is new or happening over there that is worthwhile. So be on the lookout for that. And of course, all the links are in the episode description for ways to stay in contact with us. We'll probably be active on X, Instagram, TikTok for the most part, but otherwise those are the places that you can find us and continue the conversation or just stay up to date with all the cool stuff that we're doing. Also, one last thing that I wanted to note in the news segment here is that a pretty cool thing is that a Star Wars A New Hope is finally getting a Welsh language dub. So I know they've been doing various language dubs over the years for various important films of all different types of languages. And I'm glad to see that finally for the Welsh community, or at least the Welsh-speaking community, that they will have a chance to watch Star Wars in their native language. So it's a great thing. Representation is awesome across all fronts here. And I can't wait to at least hopefully they release this on Disney Plus, so maybe you can check out a few minutes of it here as hear some of the differences between the voice acting and all that stuff. I did that when Star Wars Celebration was in Tokyo a few years ago now, and just wanted to hear what that Japanese dub of A New Hope sounded like. It was pretty cool. It's available on Disney Plus. They've got all the different types of dubs available on there that you can check out. Pretty awesome stuff. So folks, that is all that I have for the news this week. Again, if you want to stay connected, we have all of our links in the episode description: X, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Threads, Blue Skies, the places to get in contact with us. We also have a Patreon site. For as little as $1 a month, you can get access to Force Ghost Conversations related goodies, and you don't want to miss out on that because we have a lot of great episodes, of the extra episodes of the podcast on there. So make sure you go check that out and subscribe at the tier that works best for you. And we also have a TeePublic store where you can get access to Force Ghost Conversations merchandise, such as t-shirts, hoodies, pillows, you name it. There's a whole plethora of stuff on that website. and hope that you go check it out. Again, all the links are in the episode description, and that is all the housekeeping things that I had for this part of the episode here. Let's get into our main topic discussion with Greg, talking about Claudia Gray's novel, Bloodline. Stay tuned. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Force Ghost Conversations, your home for cozy deep dives into all things Star Wars and Lucasfilm adjacent properties. And we are here this week to talk about one of my favorite stories in new Star Wars canon, which is, of course, Claudia Gray's wonderful book, Bloodline, taking us back to Leia just before the events of The Force Awakens. And boy, is there a lot of political intrigue to talk about in this one. And we have a guest on the show. It is Dr. Greg Cass coming back to talk more book talk with us here. Greg, how are you doing? And welcome back to Force Ghost Conversations.
Oh, well, thank you for inviting me back, and I'm very excited to be here. Bloodline is also a favorite of mine in the new canon, and the way things shook out is I ended up listening to this, and then I basically finished it the night before I could go buy the new Star Wars Legacy, the new Leia book, which is between Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker. So it was fun to kind of spend some of my August in Leia world. So thanks for the opportunity.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And I've heard great things already about Legacy. People are putting it, a lot of people I've seen are putting it at the top of their new canon lists. Have you finished it yet?
I have. I mean, I don't think I put it quite that high, but it's very enjoyable. It definitely fits very snugly between those two movies, and features a planet we've seen in a completely different part of Star Wars or two. I'm not sure which parts are public and which parts would be considered spoilers, so I'll keep it vague. But it works pretty well. There's a plot line I didn't love, but the Rey and Leia material is really excellent and really kind of fills that in. And there might be a cameo or two that is really, really exciting, but I'll, again, just leave that vague.
Now, does it change your opinion at all about Rise of Skywalker? Because I know it's still not like one of your top favorite films of the franchise, but do you have a yearning to rewatch it again with different eyes after going through this story?
Yeah, I think the nicest thing I can say is that I was excited to go watch Rise of Skywalker again. I actually haven't done so yet. I just haven't had the opportunity, but yeah, I mean, I was excited to watch it again. It's still, I don't think it addresses parts of Rise of Skywalker that I already thought were working. It didn't really touch on the things that didn't work as well, which, it's not its job to fix, quote unquote, that movie. But yeah, it leaned into some of the things that I think are really special about Rise of Skywalker. So.
Well, in many years to come, there will be other books to tackle those other aspects. And as every aspect of Star Wars gets talked further and further into the deeper further, that is, of when books come out regarding it, then it helps to further contextualize things. So who knows? There's always in motion the future is. But we're here to talk about 2016's Bloodline, Greg. And, unintentionally, as we're doing these kind of book talk episodes over the last year here, we're having this episode around the 10th anniversary of the release of this story. What did you think of this book when it came out in 2016? Did you pick it up at Barnes & Noble on day one? Were you pre-ordering it? What was 2016 Greg like back then?
Well, I think we established in a previous episode that I did get the Barnes & Noble special edition, which had to have not been a pre-order, but a day one run to Barnes & Noble at that time in my life. So
nice.
2016, I was still in graduate school. Nope, that's not true. I graduated in 2014. I was in my first teaching job, and my son was born in June of that year. So, it was a time when I was around the house a lot more. He was born in 2015. I'm off. No, I had a 1-year-old, and he
still young.
Yeah, still young. I remember being very excited for it to come out. I think in that moment, kind of after The Force Awakens, we all wanted to kind of figure out the politics in particular, because I think a lot of us were confused. I actually remember way back to the celebration in 2015, seeing the little placards that said resistance. And I was like, wait, who's the resistance? Like, what are they like always having those questions. And I think one of the more fair criticisms of Force Awakens is just that it wasn't interested in those questions, right? I think in the kind of swerve away from the prequels, it's like, we're just going to tell a character-based story. And people can agree or disagree with that decision. But it's just true that you didn't really get a picture of what was going on in the galaxy. We knew somehow Hosnian Prime was now the capital, but didn't really understand why. And this book, I think, started some of that work, and especially the relationship between the New Republic and the Resistance and why those were separate entities. So this was really helpful. And, I think back then we were, of course, before the High Republic, but Claudia Gray had already done her... Oh gosh, I'm blanking. The Lost Stars.
She had, yes, by this point,
and then she'd also done Leia, Princess of Alderaan, and I was a fan of both of those books when they came out, and so I was excited to see her getting handed an adult novel, quote unquote, or the main line. So I was really excited, and then it lived up to the hype. And I think Claudia Gray is low-key one of the best authors we have in Star Wars.
Do you think this is the one that like cemented that status of being top tier Star Wars author? Like, if she's doing something, I'm already pre-ordering it the second I'm told that it exists.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to say because, I recall Lost Stars being an instant hit. And to this day, when you see people who create lists of like, where should you start in Star Wars, often Lost Stars is on that list because it's, it weaves in and out of the original trilogy. Yeah. And it tells an original story with good characters. So I think that had already established her name somewhat. But I definitely, by this one, would have bought anything with her name on. I mean, that's a little disingenuous for me. I buy anything with the Star Wars logo on it. I just finished some absolutely awful Legends YA because I found it at a secondhand store. So I'll buy anything with the logo on it.
Whoa! Awful Legends YA. That's the good stuff there. That's the formative years for me of Star Wars. That's it. I think this was a really solid story myself too. It was one of those that I couldn't wait to like read. I think I bought it really early on, and like the resurgence of Star Wars, and found it at a BAM. We didn't have a Barnes and Noble. We had the Books a Million beside us there in Pennsylvania, so I definitely picked that up. And unfortunately, because of grad school, it's out on the shelf until now. And then you learn to rediscover how to read again for pleasure and fun. You're like, oh, I can actually enjoy this once again. So this is one of the ones that I was like, I made a beeline for after we finished the Aftermath trilogy and went straight on. I was like, this is a logical leap after that point, especially with some of the Leia content that you get in there, a little bit of Mon Mothma and too and all that, but then really diving into the political stuff here as well. So this was a true delight to read. It's one of my favorites now in this new canon era. I shouldn't even say new canon era. We've been in it for over 10 years now. This is just canon. Yeah. The Legends is going to soon be out of date in terms of like how much time that we had with it versus beyond now. But like you were saying already, Bloodline takes place in this Star Wars timeline a few years prior to the events of The Force Awakens now. But it does set a pivotal line of events in motion that showcases the fractured operations of the New Republic. So with that, the story tells us that there are essentially two political parties, centrists and populists. So, Greg, if you can, how would you define both of those groups for the listeners who perhaps have never listened or perhaps may have read this book a couple months ago and needs a refresher on it?
I mean, I thought about it a lot in terms of centrifugal and centripetal force. So the centrists want all the power to flow to the center, as the name implies. So that would be, the equivalent in U.S. politics of a strong executive, right? That you have a president or an executive branch or a governor that wields the majority of power. And the position of the centrists is that this is how you get actual action done. This is how you keep the trains running on time, kind of all those cliches about it. The populists are much more about having power spread out into the planetary governments and have local authorities handle problems for the most part. And it was funny thinking about that now because in some ways the political parties in the US have kind of flip-flopped on this, right?
Yeah.
That the kind of classic populist sounds a lot like the idea of states' rights, which came up, in 2016. You're much more in the Tea Party era where people were saying, the president is taking too much power. We need to send power back to the states. The states need to control everything. But then, I don't know, something seems to have happened later in 2016.
I don't know
where the political parties completely flipped and you get, the former states' rights party really arguing instead, like, no, we need to have just a strong executive who can do whatever he wants. And they became the centrists. So it is funny because I think think what Claudia Gray is pulling on is nicely, and this is meant as a compliment, is that we had entered in the U.S. in particular, and I think globally to a certain extent, an age of deep political division, and it lasts till today, where you can't interpret anything. Oh, if I really like the Odyssey, does that mean I'm a woke socialist or what have you, right? We can't interpret anything in this country outside of political party. And I think she came up with a way to do that in Star Wars, but not make it so obvious that these ones are red, these ones are blue. It's embracing that kind of divisive political nature without really mapping it one-to-one.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right there, and she was so brilliant in how she put this together here, and yeah, it's crazy in a 2016 mindset of looking at this, while also the 2026 of it all, as somehow we're still somehow Palpatine returned, to put it in a Star Wars context. Yeah, it's really interesting, and I'm curious, what do you think about Leia being a populist? Does that track for you? Does that make sense? Or is that, just the evolving one day you're this, one day the next thing kind of as you evolve in your age or time and, world things affect you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense to me. And that's probably because I'm, mostly a bit of more of a populist. I mean, it also is messy because if I think of myself as a progressive Democrat, and there are things that I think local authorities should do, but then there are things I think no, let's have healthcare in the center of the government. They could do it way better, which is kind of more of a centrist thing. Yeah. So it's not. It's really smart how it's not really I can be oh, I'd definitely be this. But you think of the Rebel Alliance, and I'm going to lean into that word alliance. It's not a central group. It is cells, right? And it's a group of organizations coming together to fight towards their common means. And that sounds a lot more like populism, and that Leia would want that. I also think, Leia would have had great allegiance to the Senate because she was a senator from, the imperial days. And, I'm thinking a little of Andor. I'm thinking a little of some of the books that are about the Senate and what's in the prequels. And it's that, democracy was there and they let the central power usurp it through emergency powers. I mean, total science fiction, could never happen anywhere, period. And so it just feels like, Leia would still be on the side of what feels a little more democratic, of letting people lead each other.
Well, to paraphrase the Thor films I just rewatched, science fiction eventually becomes fact. So yeah, it's very, very scary and very true how people are able to pick apart the pieces of our society and ourselves and then put it into a literature form that we're able to extrapolate and pull from, but also be like, hey, that came from somewhere, and that came from within. While we're on the topic of Leia, the big plot device of this book, and it's on the cover, so it's not really a big spoiler to anybody, but also we're 10 years beyond, so deal with it, is that there's a political scandal that wrecks the galaxy upon the public announcement that Darth Vader is Leia's father. Whoa now. What did you make of how it all came about with the reveal? Does it reflect what you think would overall happen if this were a thing in real life?
So I had remembered this as the central part of the book, but I didn't necessarily remember how it happened. And then the kind of pieces fall together, and again, we're in spoiler mode. So it's the fact that Bail Organa, our beloved space Jimmy Smits, he wanted to leave Leia, sometimes, wanted to leave Leia a message in case he was killed, presumably in the actions of the rebellion, which he eventually was, essentially. And
by the very man.
Wanted to make sure that she had a way to find out the truth about her parentage. And I think Claudia Gray is very clever in how she finds he would hide it on this planet that has this ritual so that when she comes of age through her heritage, then she would get this gift and she would have the recording. And I liked how even in the recording, he's saying I hope this isn't news to you at this point, which it's not news to her, but it's news to the galaxy. So I liked all of those trappings. And then you get the layer of the rival senator who finds the recording and leaks it and spends it out. The other, main character almost is Ransom Casterfo, who's this kind of counterpoint to Leia on the other side. I think they build this nice message of when we forget about politics and work on human relationships, it's better for all of us, which is a great message to send to the divided world. To a certain extent, we don't forgive all sins.
No. Accountability.
We still are Indiana Jones punching Nazis sometimes.
That's right.
So, but I thought all of that was layered together really well. And it did work well that Ransom had this backstory where he really hated Darth Vader.
Yeah.
So that he would reveal this information and be personally hurt by the revelation and kind of act without thinking. And then the ramifications actually cause him to have some regret. He's still hurt by it, but there. I mean, it's a little hard to say, would this happen, how would this fall out in the real world? Because, we're talking about the son of a cyborg in space or daughter of a cyborg in space. But I do think that people are hurt by their family relations in politics, even in ways that don't make sense. There's some current events that are very obviously that you should be hurt. But I was just on vacation in the state of Maine, and there's a Bush running for office up there. And he's kind of like, yeah, but I'm not one of those, but he is one of those. Like he kind of is running more on his first name because, I think there's baggage to be a Bush in a bluish
and
state.
just any state these days.
Yeah. So it's really curious to me that continues because, you would hope that we would consider any candidate on the strengths and weaknesses of their own character, but that's not the way big stupid animals do things, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I really like how this comes together in the book too, because correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't it like Leia didn't want this appointment to be a pseudo queen of this moon of this surviving moon of Alderaan or something like that, and that's where this treasure chest was, and because the lady that she appointed to, who really didn't want it also, but kind of wanted Leia's job at the same time, and to overthrow Leia, take her out, stumbles upon it, and she's like, jackpot, let me find the right person to to dish this out into the world. I really enjoyed how the discovery of all that, and then actually it's a really heartfelt message from Bale too, so just imagining that it's Jimmy Smits doing it. It's like, okay, that's it's so well done. And then, just imagining, obviously the worst case scenario would be like if Hitler had children, right? And people tried to hide that, or, then it comes out in some big scandal reveal. I mean, there's been scandals across all of, history and time, as politics do. We're dealing with scandals right now, currently, of sorts, as always will be. But I thought that this was really well done overall across the board here. I think it tracked. I think the only thing that I probably would, as you mentioned with Ransom, kind of feeling some remorse or regret for what he did, especially once he had that kind of heart-to-heart with Leia about it. Like, he was making a lot of assumptions about her without having that, giving her the time to explain herself why she hadn't been forthright about it. And then once they had that conversation, he really pulled back on his sentiment against I believe the centrist command, whoever was running the party, the leadership, I guess, were no, triple down. You have aspirations. We might make you chancellor because of this now. Come on. Join us. But then he pulls back on that. And I think that's the thing that you might not see in today's politics, which is sad, is it's become so polarized. We must defeat our enemy that we don't even see our enemy as humans anymore. And that's for both sides too, frankly. I would say if there was more understanding and talking, perhaps they would realize that healthcare for all is a good idea. Let's talk about how we can implement it or figure out a way to solve it, rather than, oh, we have 70%. We don't even need to talk to you in our political system. So, take care. See ya. But yeah, I think it was really well done, and always good to see, because I think for me, the way that I always interpret the sequel trilogy, because I think people are always like, well, it undermines the victory on Endor. To some people, just by nature of existing 7, 8, and 9, that it ruins, Vader's redemption. And I've always seen, or at least I've interpreted the sequel trilogy as being I guess you would say it if the prequel trilogy is the rise of Anakin Skywalker and the fall the middle trilogy is about the redemption and the suffering of Anakin Skywalker, then I would think it's about the legacy of Anakin Skywalker and Darth Vader is about 7, 8, and 9, right? Do we embrace the good parts of Anakin? Do we reject the bad parts? Or, Kylo Ren has a little bit of a journey with both there, as they have a similar mirrored arc. But also Rey has, experiences with all of that. And how does Luke and Leia grapple with it? And Leia, I think at least by episode 8, I think is with the hair she's embracing too, the outfits that she has. She's definitely like, hey, like I'm the daughter of Vader, but that doesn't mean I am Vader. Like they are a part of me, both my mother and my father. And Anakin was also my dad, but also Darth Vader was also my dad. And how do I reconcile with that? And this is really, to me, bringing that to the forefront again of like, this is about legacy, moving on. Like, so it still makes Anakin arguably like the through line main character, I would say, of the whole Star Wars saga, right? The Skywalker story. But I think, at least that's how I interpret it. So I'm glad to see that Claudia Gray is picking up some of those through lines as well. But really, amidst the turmoil of this scandal, there's also a very important subplot, which is hinting at the rise of and strength of the First Order at the same time. So do you think that the New Republic's ambivalence portrayed in this book lines up with what we come to know of them during the events of The Force Awakens? Maybe it's like 7 years later? Is that correct in that guesstimation I have?
Yeah, right. Because I think I would say Ben is already kind of 12, 13. He's off with Luke on his own. And so, put Kylo more in his early 20s. I think sounds right. I'm not positive on. A bigger expert might know the exact years on all of those, those events. Yeah, but I think it's funny because we've learned a lot more and yet not a lot more about the New Republic since this book came out, but it fits together a little bit with Alphabet Squadron, which we haven't totally unpacked yet, but we have someday on the agenda, where I would say Alphabet Squadron is very concerned with the kind of PTSD of the soldiers who fought in the rebellion, and how, so like you're saying, the legacy of the conflict and almost like how
an
they
odyssey of sorts.
go back. Almost, yeah. And then I do think the Mandalorian / Ahsoka world has shown us that the New Republic would like to turn a blind eye and stick to its ideals more than actually help people. And my favorite version of that across the Disney Plus shows is the episode of Mandalorian with Dr. Pershing on Coruscant and Katie O'Brien. And I know she has a character name, but the actress.
One day we'll
people didn't like that episode because they're like, we would like some Mandalorian in our Mandalorian show, please. But I think that showed to me that the New Republic's heart is in the right place, but it's totally overburdened. And I think we get this idea of the kind of reduction of armed forces that's in this book, and it's a little bit in Aftermath, that Mon Mothma's dream is to demilitarize. And that's great, except the problem is there's this group of bad actors out there with the First Order, and it's not going to take much for the threat. And so it becomes clear. I actually really liked, and I would say it's a piece that hasn't been picked up since this book, which is the First Order is still out there in the unknown regions, but we've got a militia movement, which again feels familiar to some U.S. history. Particularly, I think Claudia Gray and I might be similar to the same age because all the political things I remember, but real concerns about these kind of paramilitary groups, and that's what we have here. And it's like that they're just ready to sign on and join the revolution coming with the First Order, and I think I still personally struggle with figuring out how powerful the First Order becomes through the sequel trilogy, because it's they're not there when Force Awakens starts, and then they kind of take over a chunk of the galaxy in Last Jedi, but then they're everywhere in Rise of Skywalker, and that's a year. So it's a little confusing, and there's also the Sith Eternal, which I'm not even touching.
The Final Order too, yes.
yeah. So all that still remains a little messy, but I think this does help somewhat kind of explain how it could happen. And the analogy I've always heard and repeated is that the First Order is the Nazis who ran off and hid in Argentina, right? Which my recent Marvel viewing, my son and I did all the X-Men movies. And I forgot Magneto goes hunting those Nazis a little bit in one of the movies. And it's they gained force and power, and then they were able to come back and attack again. And it kind of feels they could have been stopped at this early stage. that becomes Leia's motivation. She wants to do this. There's no political will, and she decides, I'm just going to go do it, which is a little more of a kind of centrist attitude, right? Like, we should just do it and not make the decision democratically.
Yeah, and exactly. It's a little bit more of the Anakin side of things, right? They should be made to do it. And who's going to do it? You? Maybe. So I think, yeah, exactly. Yes, ending everything you're saying there. It's just frustrating to some degree, right? Because you're like, with the hindsight of I know what happens here. I've seen the destruction of Hosnian Prime. Like, I know your doom is coming for all these people with all your good intentions and all of that. But, it's the idea of what is Star Wars, right? Star Wars, this is about pacifism and war at the same time, and the hypocrisy and contradiction of it while being true at the same time. And this is that. We have the benefit of seeing a prequel to something that we know is already going to happen, and the horrific events that are eventually going to happen when they come into a head because people didn't make decisions and acted ahead of time. You could even say for the Second World War, right? Like, appeasement and continuing to avoid a war eventually led to a war, and arguably probably an even grander war before they could even, they could have just went in while they were still rearming and taken them out and defeated them and made sure that a proper democratic system was put in place versus what they ended up doing, which led to global atrocities and millions and millions and millions of people dead, and a whole global conflict that led to the rise of nuclear weapon powers that leave us in a constant fear and panic of terror. So if history has proven anything, it's that we should act rather than wait, especially when you have all the clues and information. So that's I would say is the frustrating part. You're like, hey, sound the alarm bells. Let's do it. Let's hop in there. But as also is the case too, and especially after watching literally before we hopped on here, Winter Soldier, is how much of it is propagandized and how much is integrated already within the system of people that are on payrolls of other things that are actively working against your interests, even though you elected them, or maybe didn't elect them, but you put trust in institutions that are supposed to be in your best interest, and then they don't. Crazy. It's a crazy world we live in.
And we get back to that in the Ahsoka series where they're supposed to be dismantling the Star Destroyers and they're actually building the them. Biggest weapons to go get. And, I forget some of the finer plot points of that show, but it's really clear that it's again, best intentions, but there are bad actors within the system. And if the system is as loose, then it's just going to happen.
It means nothing. So as you mentioned already, the end of this book sees Leia pushed out of her political career, but she's renewed, taking up the first pieces of the Resistance. What do you make of that humble origin story for the group who will eventually take the fight to the First Order in the sequel trilogy?
So this is again what was a nice resonance with the other Leia book I read, Star Wars Legacy, because they're very humble at the end of Last Jedi, right? I mean, the Resistance, as
we have all we need.
Understand it, we have what we need, and it's 20 people on the Millennium Falcon. The actual number, who's there, it's a little hard to figure out who makes it. There are a bunch of people in the cave that don't show up on the Falcon, so it's are they just in another room, or did they leave Mark Hamill's kids?
It's a big closet, Greg.
Somebody's in Han's quarters or cooking up a meal over in the kitchen. But so I really like this, and I like the idea that they are 100% Leia's organization and such. I liked earlier. One of my problems with Legends canon is at a certain point, Han, Leia, and Luke are grandparents, and it's they're exhausted, and it's we just these people have done nothing but have these adventures for 50 years since A New Hope, or how I don't think they got quite that far, but they got really far after A New Hope, and so then it was these people deserve a break. And I liked this kind of thread of Leia trying to say, I want to just retire. I want to do something for myself. I've done my time. Mm-hmm. But then the way that gets turned into the Resistance and, grabbing just a few pilots. I love the moment early in the book where she's drinking the moonshine. I forget what they call it, that the pilots are brewing, and Snap tries to hide the hooch from her, and she calls him out, and so it fits with Leia's personality, and it just builds a really nice set of characters to begin this process. And I like it a lot. And I do think it was a good decision, however we got there in the sequel trilogy, to make the good guys another little ragtag force, seemingly overmatched. And the other bit of Force Awakens that echoed in my mind is when Han and Leia start to reconcile in the really excellent scenes about their son, about Kylo. Han says, I didn't know what to do, so I just went to doing the only thing I knew how. And Leia says, we both did. And there's great sadness in Carrie Fisher's reading of that line. It's like, yeah, all she'd known her whole life was to be a military leader. So she's going to go do that and deal with her grief that way. And we're getting there in this book.
Slowly but surely, we're getting there. Yeah, I mean, I think, again, just handing here, it's interesting that this, like, again, she's the only one that's willing to take this up, and they're just in a hangar. Like, that's how humble the origin is. It's like it's a couple ships, a couple people, and like, okay, we know at least by the time of the Force Awakens, when you could say it's probably its largest, right, just before the Starkiller base battle. They really, on Dakar, they've built that thing up. So over the course of, as we're estimating here, roughly 7 years. Geez, that's a lot of work, and I think the show Resistance does a good job too about explaining how it's slowly built up over time as well from a different angle, and Leia's involvement in that too. But yeah, great stuff here, great all around, and a good tie-in book. Like, I think this was just after The Last Jedi came out, if I remember, or maybe just before. Was in the lead up. Can't remember exactly. It was around that time frame, though, and really did a good job of filling in some of those gaps that we were looking for overall to make a solid story here. So my last question for you, Greg, it's been 10 years now, and you've re-listened to it. You read it when it first came out, and you've read a lot of Star Wars books in between. How do you think the story holds up against other books that have come out in the interim?
Really well. I mean, I would certainly say, it's always hard for me to decide how to recommend Star Wars books when somebody asks. I don't think this is the rollicking, I love A New Hope, go watch this, it'll be like a serial printed on the page. It's much more Star Wars West Wing in some ways, or something like that. And, that remains one of my favorite kinds of Star Wars books. We have the Mask of Fear trilogy, which started last year, and I think still last year.
Continuing, yes. Yeah.
We're getting a second one in September. And then I also would put Catalyst in this, which
Another great
is
one.
the
Another
Rogue
tie-in,
One prequel novel, which again, they're great. They're not like lightsabers and spaceships and all those things. They're kind of a different style. But one of the things that I love about canon is that you can have all these different lanes, and it's a great book too. And it's always hard. I have friends who ask me all the time, like, yeah, but this is like a great novel, right? I'm like, well, I love Star Wars and I love reading Star Wars books. Sorry, I study literature, so it's very hard to put anything up at that level. But I think at its best moments, this reads like a good airport thriller, right? Like, I'd say this is easily better than like Dan Brown or some of those types of writers.
Very true.
So yeah, I still recommend it only for Star Wars fans, but it's a good time.
Now you got me down this path here, and I have to ask, I know your favorite story is Moby Dick. What is the Moby Dick of Star Wars? Star Wars books, I should say.
I mean, I don't think we have one. Do we
not there yet?
Something big and long and expansive and like philosophical, I don't think we've attempted yet. And I don't expect that.
You don't think we'll ever get it?
I don't think so. But, I guess I shouldn't. I don't think Star Wars is interested in being more than like 400 zippy pages, whatever the lane it's in. And I don't think anybody describes Moby Dick as zippy. Yeah.
No. I doubt the people that are, what do they read it every year at the One Maritime Museum or library?
The New Bedford Whaling Museum, which just went viral, listeners may know, because they have a new set of merch, which they got a 1-star Google review that just said worst aquarium ever. So they've been getting the rounds on their T-shirts they're selling with that. But so I don't think we'll get there in Star Wars necessarily, but that's okay. I mean, again, me saying that Star Wars books aren't great literature doesn't mean I don't like them or think they're fun. I read a lot of bad books, and these are not always the bad books that I'm reading. So
no, and hey, challenge accepted out there to the world, right? Go make the Star Wars Moby Dick. Someone's going to do it. I mean,
absolutely.
If this franchise keeps going on for another 200 years, who knows what wacky, zany stories they'll do to keep this thing fresh and interesting and alive. Hey, sky's the limit. Who knows? But
sky's the limit.
Greg, it's been a blast having you on here chatting to all things Claudia Gray's wonderful story, Bloodline. Where can the folks find you if they want to continue the conversation or just learn about the cool stuff that you're doing?
Well, thank you so much for having me on, and always excited to do the book club. I look forward to my next homework assignment. I assume Alphabet Squadron, but we can give it a minute. We can give it some time. Yeah, I'm on Instagram intermittently. I don't know. I haven't been on much because it's summer and it's fun to not be on my phone. But that's at EyeOnCanon, EyeOnCanon. I know. I'm going to appear on Rebel Base Card sometime soon. I think we're covering The Ninth Jedi, which is a Star Wars show that dropped maybe yesterday as we're recording this. And I haven't heard a lot of people talking about yet, but it's out there in the world. And then over on the Long Take Review, we have a whole bunch of episodes coming out right now. The box office is literally bigger than it's ever been. So we have some Odyssey coverage, and we also took some time for The Invite. I was not on a Spider-Man retrospective, but I will absolutely be sure that I am on the Spider-Man Brand New Day podcast. So that's at the Long Take Review that you can find wherever you get your fine podcasts.
Amazing. And folks, guess what? Next week is D23, the Ultimate Disney fan event, and we will be boots on the ground there covering all things Star Wars and whatever else we can get into at the convention floor over the 3 days from August 15th through the 16th. So that's where we'll be at. So make sure you're following all the social channels and keeping up to date if you want to stay in the news about what cool things we're doing over there. So be sure to follow all that. Again, links in the episode description. We've got some cool episodes coming out in the meantime as we prepare for that, and also just react to everything that's going to be announced too. So be on the lookout for all those things. And of course, we'll be back in your feeds next week with a brand new episode. And until then, may the Force be with you. Take care.